David Miller stood in the corner of his Manhattan apartment, staring out through floor-to-ceiling windows at the skyline. The late afternoon sun cast an orange glow over the skyscrapers, but he felt no warmth. Behind him, the living room smelled faintly of polished marble and expensive cologne, a silent reminder of the life he believed he had built through ambition alone. Emily, his wife, sat at the edge of a cream-colored sofa, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She had learned to stay quiet when David was in one of his moods. "You just don't fit this life anymore," David said, his voice cutting through the air like glass breaking. "I need a partner who can keep up, someone with influence, someone who understands the circles I move in." You're just not enough." Emily looked up, her chest tightening. She had heard his complaints before, but never with this finality. "Not enough," she whispered, more to herself than to him. David turned, his tailored suit fitting him like armor. "You're too poor, Emily. You don't come from money and you haven't made any. Do you know how that looks? To have a wife who still thinks working at a non-profit is admirable. People laugh behind my back. I'm tired of pretending." Her throat burned, but she swallowed the words she wanted to scream. The apartment, once filled with shared laughter, felt suffocating. Every wall seemed to echo his rejection. She knew this moment had been coming, yet the cruelty in his delivery stunned her. "I loved you when we had nothing," she finally said, her voice steady despite the ache inside. "I stood by you when you were drowning in student loans. Do you remember who cooked for us in that tiny walk-up when all we had was canned soup? You've forgotten where you came from, David," he smirked, lifting a glass of scotch from the bar cart. "No, Emily. I've outgrown where I came from." That's the difference. The silence that followed was unbearable. Outside, car horns blared on Fifth Avenue, muffled by the thick glass. Inside, their marriage unraveled word by word. Emily stood slowly, her palms trembling, and walked to the door. She knew if she stayed a moment longer, her dignity would break. "Then this is it," she said, gripping her bag. "I won't fight for someone who doesn't value me." David didn't respond. He only sipped his drink, eyes fixed once again on the skyline, as if she had already disappeared from his life. When Emily stepped into the hallway, the cold air of the building's corridor wrapped around her like a warning and a promise all at once. Her chest rose and fell quickly, but she forced herself forward one step, then another. Her life as she knew it had ended, yet deep inside a fragile spark refused to die. And that spark is where this story begins. Before we continue, take a second to subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss the rest of Emily's incredible journey, a journey that proves how strength and perseverance can turn heartbreak into triumph. Back in the apartment, David poured himself another drink, already imagining a future with someone more glamorous, someone who could decorate his life like a trophy. What he didn't know was that by dismissing Emily, he was igniting the very fire that would one day eclipse every achievement he had ever claimed. As Emily stepped into the bustling Manhattan evening, the city roared around her. Neon signs flickered, yellow cabs rushed past, and strangers hurried by, each chasing their own survival. Emily felt small, almost invisible, but she also felt something stirring in her chest, a mix of fear and determination. She had lost the man she once believed was her partner, but perhaps she had found something far greater, the chance to define herself on her own terms. The night air carried the scent of roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor, a sharp contrast to the sterile perfection of the apartment she had just left. Emily inhaled deeply, grounding herself. She was alone, yes, but not defeated. Not yet. This was the end of her marriage, but it was also the beginning of a path she had never dared to walk. The city stretched before her with its chaos and opportunities, and somewhere within that maze, Emily would discover who she truly was. The next morning, the divorce papers would be drawn up, finalizing what David had so coldly demanded. But tonight, as she wandered through the streets of New York, Emily allowed herself a single thought that carried her forward. He may have abandoned her for being too poor, but one day she would prove that wealth is built not on money, but on resilience and vision. And with that thought, Emily disappeared into the crowd, the glow of Times Square lighting her way into a future neither she nor David could yet imagine. The courthouse in downtown Manhattan buzzed with the energy of 100 separate battles, all contained within its marble walls. Lawyers in dark suits hurried across polished floors, their voices sharp and clipped. Emily sat quietly on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, her hands resting in her lap, fingers twisting the hem of her blouse. She had never imagined her marriage would end here, reduced to paperwork and signatures. David arrived moments later, flanked by his attorney, a man with slicked back hair and a smile that carried no warmth. David's cologne arrived before he did, expensive, overpowering, a scent meant to announce his presence. He barely acknowledged Emily, offering only the faintest of glances as though she were a stranger he had long since dismissed. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, adjusting his cufflinks. Emily's lawyer, a woman named Karen Wallace, leaned closer and whispered, "Stay calm. Let them speak first. You'll have your say." Inside the courtroom, the air was cooler, more sterile. The judge, an older man with silver hair, glanced at the file before him. "Mr. Miller, Mrs. Miller, we are here to finalize your divorce. Mr. Miller, you have filed on grounds of irreconcilable differences. Is this correct?" David stood, voice smooth, rehearsed. "Yes, Your Honor." "Our paths have diverged. I no longer believe this marriage serves either of us." Emily felt the sting of his words. "Serves either of us," he said, as if their years together had been a business arrangement gone sour. She fought the urge to speak, reminding herself to hold her composure. The judge turned his eyes toward her. "Mrs. Miller, do you contest the divorce?" Her heart raced, but her voice was steady. "No, Your Honor, I do not contest it." David's attorney slid a thick folder across the table. "We've outlined the division of assets, Your Honor. Mr. Miller has agreed to provide a modest settlement, enough to cover temporary housing and basic expenses. Beyond that, Mrs. Miller has no claim." Emily looked down at the document placed before her. The numbers were small, insulting even, considering the wealth David had accumulated. But she knew fighting for more would mean clinging to him, and that was a battle she refused to wage. Karen leaned close again. "We can challenge this if you want. You deserve more." Emily shook her head. "No, let him keep it." "I don't need his money." David's eyes flickered with something, surprise, maybe even irritation. He had expected her to fight, to beg, to demand her share of the empire he believed was his alone. Instead, she was walking away freely, and that unsettled him more than he would admit. The judge reviewed the papers, stamped them, and looked up. "This divorce is finalized. Mr. Miller, Mrs. Miller, I wish you both clarity as you move forward." The gavel struck once, a hollow sound that seemed to echo through Emily's chest. It was over. Outside the courtroom, David adjusted his tie, his voice cool. "You'll thank me one day, Emily. You were never built for this world. Better to move on quietly." She met his eyes, and for the first time there was no fear, no longing, no hesitation. Only resolve. "One day, David," she said softly, "you'll realize you threw away something money can't buy." He smirked, dismissing her words as nothing more than bitterness, and strode down the corridor with his attorney. Emily stepped out of the courthouse alone. The autumn wind swept through the streets, carrying with it the scent of roasted peanuts from a vendor on the corner. The city was alive, indifferent to her heartbreak, yet brimming with possibilities she had not yet dared to see. She tightened her coat around her shoulders and walked forward, her footsteps quickening with every block. The divorce papers were signed, the marriage was buried, but her story, her real story, was only beginning to take shape. And what she would build from the ashes of this humiliation would one day leave David speechless. The train from New York to Boston rattled through autumn landscapes, trees painted in fiery shades of orange and red. Emily sat by the window, her small suitcase tucked beneath the seat, her divorce papers folded neatly inside her purse. The city she left behind had rejected her, but ahead lay a place where she could begin again. Each passing mile felt like a thread snapping, cutting her free from the life she no longer wanted. Boston greeted her with a chill sharper than Manhattan's, the kind that slipped under coats and bit at the skin. The streets bustled with students carrying backpacks, professors in tweed jackets, and locals rushing between cafes and subway stations. The air smelled faintly of roasted coffee and crisp leaves, a scent that promised both change and challenge. She rented a small room in an aging brick townhouse near Kenmore Square. The ceilings were low, the floorboards creaked, and the radiator hissed unpredictably, but it was hers. Her roommate, Sofia Ramirez, greeted her with a wide smile and a firm handshake. "I know it's not much," Sofia said, brushing her dark hair back. "But it's cheap, it's warm enough, and the landlord only complains half the time. That counts as a win." Emily laughed for the first time in weeks. "Trust me, this feels like freedom." Sofia, a graduate student with ambitions of starting her own marketing firm, quickly became a source of encouragement. Over cups of tea late at night, she listened as Emily spoke haltingly about her divorce. "He told me I wasn't enough," Emily admitted one evening, her voice catching. Sofia leaned forward, eyes blazing. "Then he's a fool." "You don't let someone else decide your worth, not ever." Her words struck something deep inside Emily. For years, she had measured herself through David's standards, shrinking whenever he compared her to others. Now, with Sofia's blunt support, she began to imagine a different measure. Her own. To pay rent, Emily worked mornings at a bookstore near Boston Common, where the scent of old paper lingered on her clothes long after her shifts ended. In the evenings, she took night classes in business management at Boston University. She carried her notebooks like lifelines, scribbling down every concept, every formula, every spark of possibility. The workload was crushing. Some nights she returned home too exhausted to speak, collapsing onto her bed without dinner. Still, she pressed on. Her professor once remarked, "You take notes like someone who has something to prove." He was right. She wasn't just studying. She was arming herself. Sofia often teased her, though always with affection. "Most people cry into ice cream after a divorce. You? You're conquering balance sheets." Emily smiled, though her eyes betrayed the fatigue. "Ice cream won't build me a future." Yet beneath her determination, doubt gnawed at her. The numbers were complex, the theories abstract. More than once she stared at a spreadsheet until the columns blurred. A voice whispered inside her head, "Maybe David was right. Maybe you're not cut out for this." But then she remembered the smirk on his face as he dismissed her in the courthouse and her hands tightened around her pen. That memory fueled her resolve more than any lecture ever could. Boston was not an easy city. The wind cut through her coat on her long walks to class. The rent stretched her budget, and loneliness often crept into the corners of her room. But she also felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Every challenge tested her, and every small victory reminded her that she was capable of more than she had ever believed. As winter approached, Emily stood on the steps of Boston University after class, watching the snow begin to fall over the Charles River. The cold stung her cheeks, but instead of retreating, she lingered, letting the flakes land on her hair. For the first time since her marriage collapsed, she felt the faintest glimmer of possibility. Somewhere inside her, beneath the layers of hurt and exhaustion, an idea was beginning to take root. She didn't know it yet, but that seed would change everything. Spring in Boston carried a different kind of energy. The Charles River shimmered under the sunlight, joggers filled the pathways, and cafes buzzed with students buried in laptops and steaming cups of coffee. For Emily, life had settled into a rhythm. Work at the bookstore in the mornings, classes at night, and endless hours in between studying at small tables scattered across the city. She was surviving, but survival alone never satisfied her. One afternoon, while shelving books in the store, she overheard a customer complaining about the excessive packaging around a shipment of household products. "All that plastic just to protect a box," the woman muttered. "It's wasteful, someone should fix it." The words lodged in Emily's mind like a spark catching on dry wood. That evening, as she walked home with her tote bag full of notes, she kept replaying the complaint. The sidewalks were littered with cardboard boxes, flattened for recycling, and garbage bags overflowed with crinkled plastic. The city itself seemed to confirm what the customer had said. Packaging was everywhere, and most of it ended up in the trash. At dinner, she brought it up to Sofia, who was stirring pasta on their tiny stove. What if packaging didn't have to be wasteful? What if it could be sustainable? Something better than all this plastic and styrofoam? Sophia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. You mean like reusable containers? Or biodegradable stuff? Exactly, Emily said, her voice gaining strength. But not the clunky designs people already complain about. Something sleek, efficient, affordable. Companies care about image, and consumers care about convenience. If there was a way to merge both with eco-friendly solutions, it could change everything. Sophia set down the spoon and leaned against the counter, her eyes narrowing with curiosity. That's not just an idea, Emily. That's a business. The word echoed in Emily's head. Business. Until now, her classes had been about theories and case studies, numbers and projections on whiteboards. But this was real. It was a problem she could see, touch, solve. Her pulse quickened with the possibility. She spent nights researching. Reports from environmental agencies showed alarming statistics. Millions of tons of packaging waste generated each year in the US alone. Consumer surveys revealed growing frustration and demand for sustainable alternatives. Yet major corporations were slow to innovate, stuck in old systems. Emily filled notebook after notebook, her handwriting cramped and hurried, as she traced connections between demand, supply, and opportunity. Sophia often peeked into her room at midnight, shaking her head. "You're obsessed." Emily smiled without looking up. Maybe. But obsession is how ideas become real. Despite her excitement, doubts shadowed her. She had no money, no industry connections, no credibility. She was a divorced woman with a bookstore job and a handful of night classes. Who would take her seriously? The thought gnawed at her late at night when the city quieted and her confidence faltered. Yet each time she remembered the words David had thrown at her, "Too poor, not enough." And instead of breaking her, those words hardened into fuel. If he believed she was incapable, she would prove him wrong, not for revenge, but to reclaim herself. One Saturday, she attended a sustainability fair at the Boston Convention Center, wandering between booths of eco-friendly products. She listened intently to innovators describing compostable utensils, solar-powered gadgets, and community recycling programs. The passion in their voices lit a fire in her chest. Here were people daring to create solutions despite limited resources. If they could do it, why couldn't she? As she left the fair, she paused on the steps outside, the city buzzing around her. In her notebook, she scribbled 3 words in bold letters: green, pack, solutions. It was only a name, but to her, it felt like a declaration. She closed the notebook, her breath quickening. For the first time, Emily felt the contours of a future not defined by what she had lost, but by what she could build. And though she didn't know it yet, that spark would soon ignite into something much greater than she ever imagined. The idea of GreenPack solutions grew quickly in Emily's mind, but turning vision into reality was another matter entirely. She began by sketching prototypes in her notebook, simple diagrams of biodegradable boxes, compostable fillers, and recyclable wraps. At first, it was exciting. Each page felt like a step toward something that could actually matter. But excitement wasn't enough. She needed funding, resources, and most importantly, someone to believe in her. Armed with her notebook and trembling confidence, Emily signed up for a small startup pitch night hosted at a co-working space in Cambridge. The room smelled of coffee and ambition, filled with eager entrepreneurs rehearsing their lines. When her turn came, she stood before a panel of local investors. Her voice shook at first, but steadied as she explained her vision. Eco-friendly packaging that was both practical and stylish. A solution for businesses eager to reduce waste without sacrificing efficiency. One investor leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. "You don't have a prototype, you don't have a team, and you don't have experience. Ideas are cheap. Execution is what matters." Another smirked, tapping his pen against the table. "It's cute, but the packaging industry is dominated by giants. You think you're going to take them on with a notebook and a dream?" Their laughter stung sharper than she expected. Heat rushed to her cheeks as she mumbled a thank you and stepped down. The applause that followed was polite but pitying. Outside, The night air felt colder than usual. Sophia hurried after her, her boots clicking against the sidewalk. "Hey, don't let them get to you," she said, grabbing Emily's arm. "They're right," Emily muttered, staring at the pavement. "I don't have anything. No money, no prototype, nothing." Sophia shook her head firmly. "What you have is vision, and vision is what makes people move mountains. Forget those smug investors, we'll find another way." Still, doubt burrowed deep. Over the following weeks, Emily applied to incubator programs, accelerators, even small grants. Each time the rejections piled higher. Some responses were polite, too early stage, not a fit for our portfolio, while others were blunt, not realistic, unlikely to scale. The bookstore became her refuge. Between shelving novels and ringing up customers, she scribbled revisions to her pitch, adjusting numbers, refining goals. Yet every attempt seemed to crumble under scrutiny. The gap between her dream and its reality felt insurmountable. One night, after another rejection email, Emily sat at the kitchen table with her head in her hands. The overhead light flickered, casting tired shadows on the walls. Sophia placed a steaming mug of tea in front of her. "You look like you've been through a war," Sophia said gently. "It feels like it," Emily whispered. "Maybe David was right. Maybe I was never enough." Sophia's eyes hardened. "Don't you dare say that. You're enough because you refuse to quit. That's what matters." Emily lifted her gaze, the tea warming her hands. "But what if all I'm doing is chasing something impossible?" Sophia leaned forward, her voice steady. "Then fail 100 times if you have to. But don't stop chasing. Because one of those failures will open the door you've been waiting for." The words didn't erase Emily's exhaustion, but they planted a fragile determination back inside her. She closed her notebook, exhaled slowly, and nodded. The road ahead was littered with rejection, but giving up now would mean proving everyone, including David, right, and that was something she couldn't accept. She wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The lecture hall at Boston University was alive with the hum of conversation, the shuffle of notebooks, and the faint scratching of pens. Emily sat near the front, as she always did, her notebook open and ready. Tonight's guest lecturer was Professor Richard Thompson, a seasoned entrepreneur turned academic whose reputation preceded him. His career had spanned decades, from launching manufacturing companies to advising sustainable startups. Students leaned forward in anticipation, eager to hear his stories. Professor Thompson stepped to the podium, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a calm presence that commanded respect. "Business," he began, "is not about ideas. It's about solving problems in ways people can't ignore. If you're not fixing something real, you're just playing pretend." The words landed heavily on Emily. They mirrored her own frustrations, the countless times she had been dismissed as unrealistic. She scribbled furiously in her notebook, her pulse quickening with each example he gave of small companies that had disrupted massive industries simply because they addressed pressing needs. After the lecture, students crowded around him asking questions. Emily lingered, hesitating at the edge of the group until most had drifted away. She clutched her notebook tightly and finally stepped forward. "Professor Thompson," she said nervously, "I think I have an idea that solves a real problem, but no one seems to believe in it." He studied her with sharp, thoughtful eyes. "What problem are you trying to solve?" "Packaging waste," she replied quickly. "Plastic, styrofoam, things that end up in landfills and oceans. I want to create sustainable packaging that's affordable and efficient enough for big companies to adopt." His expression didn't shift into the skepticism she had grown used to. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Interesting? Most people underestimate that industry because it isn't glamorous, but it's huge and waste is a real issue. Do you have a prototype?" Her shoulders sank. "Not yet. Just research, sketches, and conviction." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then, to her surprise, Thompson smiled. "Conviction is a start, but you'll need more. Come by my office hours next week. Bring your notes. So let's see what you're working with." Emily blinked, caught off guard. "Really, you'd take the time?" "Mrs. Miller," he said firmly, "if you're serious, I'll take the time." Most people only talk about their dreams. I'm curious if you're different." The following week, Emily carried her notebooks to his office, her hands trembling. His shelves were stacked with books on economics, sustainability, and entrepreneurship. He sat across from her, listening intently as she laid out her vision, her data, her market analysis. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. "You have passion, and you've done your homework. What you lack is structure. You need to refine your pitch, build a team, and find people willing to invest not just money, but belief." Emily exhaled slowly. "I've tried. I keep failing." Thompson leaned forward. "Failure isn't a wall. It's a test. The question is whether you have the stamina to keep pushing. Do you?" She met his gaze and, for the first time, felt her determination sharpen into something stronger. "Yes, I do." "Good," he said, standing and extending his hand. "Then let's get to work. I'll help you prepare for the next round of opportunities. But understand this, if you want to build something real, you'll have to be relentless." Emily shook his hand, her grip firm despite her nerves. "Relentless," she repeated. Walking out of his office, she felt lighter than she had in months. She finally had someone who didn't just dismiss her, someone who saw potential where others saw weakness. For the first time, Emily wasn't alone in her fight. Weeks of mentoring under Professor Thompson reshaped Emily's vision into something sharper. She learned how to cut the fluff from her pitch, how to translate passion into numbers, and how to show investors that her idea wasn't just idealistic, it was profitable. Each meeting with him left her exhausted, but energized, like a boxer leaving the ring battered yet stronger. "Investors don't care about dreams," Thompson reminded her during one late session. "They care about returns. Your job is to show them how your dream will become their return." Emily nodded, repeating the phrase silently until it stuck. Her chance came at a small gathering of angel investors in Cambridge, arranged through one of Thompson's contacts. The venue wasn't glamorous, just a modest conference room with folding chairs and a coffee station, but for Emily it felt like Madison Square Garden. Her palms sweated as she clutched her presentation folder, Sophia by her side for moral support. "You've got this," Sophia whispered, squeezing her hand. Emily smiled faintly, though her stomach twisted into knots. When her name was called, she stood at the front of the room and began. Her voice trembled at first but grew steadier as she spoke of mountains of plastic waste, the billions in untapped market potential, and the growing demand for eco-conscious solutions. She unveiled her concept, GreenPack Solutions, describing packaging that could be composted, recycled, and redesigned for efficiency. The room was quiet, too quiet. Emily's heart sank, but she pressed on, finishing with the confidence she didn't fully feel. "This isn't just about saving the planet," she concluded. "It's about creating the future of business, sustainable, scalable, and inevitable." One investor, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a practical tone, finally spoke. "Your idea has merit, but you have no prototype." "Why should we believe you can execute?" Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing. "Because I know what it's like to be underestimated. People have told me I wasn't enough, that I couldn't compete. And yet, here I am. I've done the research, I've built the plan, and I won't stop until I've built the product." "If you invest in me, you're not just investing in packaging, you're investing in resilience." The woman studied her for a long moment before leaning back in her chair. "Resilience, huh? We'll see." Hours later, when the event ended, Emily walked out, certain she had failed again. But as she pulled on her coat, the same investor approached. "My name is Linda Chen," she said, extending a hand. "I run an angel group focused on sustainability. You don't have a prototype, but you have grit, and grit is harder to find than capital. My group is prepared to invest $100,000 to help you get started." Emily froze, her breath catching. "You're serious?" Linda smirked. "Dead serious, but remember, this is seed money, not charity. We expect results." Emily shook her hand, her voice barely above a whisper. "You won't regret this." That night, she and Sophia celebrated in their small kitchen with takeout pizza and cheap sparkling cider. Emily laughed until tears filled her eyes, the weight of years of rejection finally beginning to lift. "We did it," Sophia cheered, raising her glass. "No," Emily corrected softly, clinking hers against it. "We're just starting." For the first time, the words GreenPack Solutions weren't just scribbles in a notebook. They were the foundation of something real. The first infusion of capital gave GreenPack Solutions life, but Emily soon discovered that launching a company was only the beginning. Money could buy raw materials, rent office space, and hire a few part-time staff, but it couldn't erase the countless hurdles that came with trying to build something from scratch. Her small Cambridge office smelled of cardboard and fresh paint. Desks were cluttered with sketches, material samples, and laptops. Sophia handled marketing, drafting bold campaigns about reshaping the future of packaging, while Emily wrestled with suppliers, manufacturers, and the unforgiving realities of production. One evening, Emily sat across a conference table in Houston, staring down a factory manager who looked unimpressed with her enthusiasm. "Biodegradable fillers," he repeated, scratching his beard. "Lady, we run plastics, that's what we do. Switching machinery costs millions. Why would we do that for you?" "Because the industry is changing," Emily insisted. "Consumers demand sustainability. Companies will follow, and you'll lose business if you don't adapt." The man chuckled, leaning back. "Maybe in California, but around here." Plastic isn't going anywhere. By the time she left the meeting, Emily's optimism had withered. The Texas heat pressed down on her as she walked to her rental car, frustration burning in her chest. Why does no one see what I see? Meanwhile, in California, a startup announced its own line of eco-friendly packaging, drawing media attention. Headlines praised their innovation, and investors flocked to their side. Emily read every article, her stomach tightening. It felt as if her vision was being stolen right out from under her. Back in Boston, she pored over her dwindling budget with Sophia. "If we don't secure manufacturing soon," Emily muttered, pressing her temples, "we'll run out of money before we even launch." Sophia tried to sound optimistic, though worry clouded her face. "We'll figure it out. Maybe smaller production runs? Local suppliers?" "Smaller runs won't attract big clients," Emily countered, "and local costs more. Either way, we're bleeding cash." The stress seeped into her nights. She often lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of her apartment, her mind racing with numbers that didn't add up. The glow of her laptop never seemed to dim as she scoured reports, searching for a solution. Even Professor Thompson noticed the strain. During one of their check-ins, he leaned across his desk, his voice stern. "You're burning out. A leader doesn't just fight battles, she delegates. You need to trust people to handle parts of this." Emily sighed. "But if they fail, the whole company fails. Then teach them, empower them. You can't build an empire alone." The words stayed with her, though doubt lingered. She wanted to be relentless, but the weight of responsibility was suffocating. One particularly brutal week, a shipment of trial materials arrived late and defective, delaying their testing phase. Emily slammed the warehouse clipboard on the table, her frustration boiling over. "This can't keep happening," she snapped at the supplier over the phone. "We're trying to prove ourselves, and you're handing us garbage." The voice on the other end was indifferent. "You're a small client. Bigger contracts get priority. That's how it works." When she hung up, her hands shook. Sophia placed a hand on her shoulder. "Hey, breathe. We'll fix this." Emily nodded, though her throat tightened. What if I can't fix it? What if everything falls apart? But even as she voiced the fear, something inside her resisted. She had been underestimated before, discarded as unworthy, and every challenge now felt like another chance to prove otherwise. The company was bleeding money, competitors were circling, and manufacturing was slipping from her grasp. Yet Emily refused to surrender. She would either find a way forward or collapse trying. And somewhere in the middle of those long nights and mounting failures, she began to sense that the breakthrough she needed was closer than she dared believe. The setbacks piled higher with each passing month, but Emily refused to let them bury her. She adjusted timelines, rewrote budgets, and leaned heavily on Sophia, who never stopped reminding her that vision mattered. Still, the numbers in their accounts dwindled, and the pressure pressed harder. Then one email changed everything. It came from the procurement department of Whole Foods Market, headquartered in Austin, Texas. They had noticed her proposal, buried among dozens of others, and wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss potential collaboration. Emily read the message 3 times, her hands trembling. Whole Foods wasn't just a grocery chain, it was a pioneer in sustainable business. If she could win them over, GreenPack Solutions might finally have legitimacy. The following week, Emily boarded a flight to Austin. The Texas sun was relentless when she stepped out of the airport, and the air smelled faintly of barbecue smoke drifting from nearby restaurants. But her nerves drowned out everything. She kept rehearsing numbers in her head, production costs, margins, market growth. In the Whole Foods lobby, she sat across from 2 executives, her presentation neatly stacked on the table. One of them, a man in a navy suit with sharp features, cut straight to the point. "We get pitches like yours every week," he said flatly. "What makes your company different?" Emily steadied her voice. "Because we don't just offer sustainability as a gimmick, we offer it as efficiency. Our packaging isn't only compostable, it reduces weight, which lowers shipping costs. It saves the planet and saves you money." The second executive, a woman with attentive eyes, leaned forward. "But you're small. We need suppliers who can scale. Can you deliver thousands of units reliably?" Emily hesitated. The honest answer was no, not yet. But then she remembered Professor Thompson's words, "Investors care about execution." She lifted her chin. "We'll scale because we have to," she said firmly. "I've built this company on rejection, on being told I couldn't do it. But every obstacle has made us leaner, smarter, hungrier. If you give us this chance, we won't just meet your expectations, we'll exceed them." For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the room. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears. Then the woman smiled faintly. "I like your fire, and we do need suppliers willing to innovate. Let's start small, a trial contract. If you deliver, we'll expand." Emily exhaled sharply, relief flooding her chest. She shook their hands, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "You won't regret this." That night, she called Sophia from her hotel room, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. "They said yes," she whispered, barely able to speak. "Whole Foods is giving us a trial contract," Sophia screamed through the phone. "Emily, do you realize what this means?" "This isn't just a door opening. It's the whole building opening." Back in Boston, the team celebrated with takeout tacos and cheap beer, their laughter echoing off the office walls. For once, the pressure eased, replaced with excitement. They had something tangible now, something powerful. When Professor Thompson heard the news, he nodded with quiet pride. "This is your chance, Emily. Don't waste it. Deliver with everything you have." And she would. For the first time, Emily felt like the world was beginning to see what she had seen all along. The battle was far from over, but GreenPack Solutions finally had its first real foothold, and from that foothold, Emily knew they could climb mountains. The Whole Foods contract transformed GreenPack Solutions from a struggling startup into a name people began to notice. What started as a small trial quickly turned into steady orders, and within months, the company's packaging lined shelves across stores in multiple states. For the first time, Emily saw her product in the hands of strangers, carried out in grocery bags, tossed into recycling bins, or composted in community gardens. It was no longer an idea scribbled in her notebook. It was real. But success didn't come gently. Demand surged faster than her team could handle. Emily spent sleepless nights on planes between Boston, Chicago, and San Francisco, negotiating with manufacturers and distributors. Her inbox overflowed with inquiries, offers, and new challenges. Scaling was exhilarating, but brutal. In Chicago, she met with a potential partner who eyed her across the table. "Your product is good, Emily, but good isn't enough. If you want to be national, you need infrastructure. Warehouses, shipping fleets, logistics teams, that takes capital. A lot of it." Emily nodded, already aware. "I'm not afraid of growth. I just need partners who believe in the vision." By now, her vision had caught fire. Investors who once dismissed her now scrambled to secure meetings. Headlines began to circulate. "The woman reinventing packaging, the eco-startup everyone's watching." Emily's name appeared in trade magazines, her photo framed with quotes about resilience and innovation. Through it all, she refused to abandon her principles. Competitors cut corners, using half-sustainable materials to save money, but Emily stood firm. "If we compromise now," she told Sophia during a late-night strategy call, "we become everything we swore to change. That's not why we started this." Sophia grinned through the video chat, her hair pulled into a messy bun. "And that's why people trust you. You're not just selling a product, you're building a movement." Yet even as Greenpack flourished, Emily felt the weight of leadership settle deeper. Employees looked to her for answers, investors demanded progress, and the media painted her as a symbol of unstoppable success. She carried it all with determination, but there were nights when she collapsed into hotel beds, staring at ceilings in anonymous cities, wondering if she was strong enough to keep going. One evening, after a conference in San Francisco, she sat at the hotel bar with Professor Thompson, who had flown in to see her keynote. "You're not the same woman who walked into my office with sketches and doubts," he said, sipping his drink. Emily laughed softly. "Some days I still feel like her." "That's good," he replied. "Stay connected to her, because that hunger, that refusal to quit, is what built all this. Never let success dull the fire that failure once lit." She nodded, his words settling deep in her chest. News of her rise traveled far, reaching even those who had once dismissed her. In a high-rise office in New York, David Miller scrolled through an article about Greenpack Solutions, his jaw tightening as he read about Emily's achievements. Her face smiled back at him from the page, confident and radiant in a way he hadn't seen when she was with him. For the first time, he realized she no longer belonged to the shadows of his past. She was building something far greater than he had ever imagined. Emily, unaware of his reaction, pressed forward with her team. She had no time to dwell on the past. The company was no longer just surviving. It was expanding, setting its sights on becoming an empire. And as she walked through the bustling Boston office, past employees brainstorming new designs and logistics teams coordinating shipments, she understood something with absolute clarity. This was only the beginning. The ballroom of a luxury hotel in Chicago buzzed with the energy of a national sustainability conference. Entrepreneurs, investors, and executives mingled beneath chandeliers, their conversations weaving a tapestry of ambition and ideas. Emily, dressed in a tailored navy suit, stood near the stage, preparing for her keynote speech. Greenpack Solutions had become one of the most anticipated topics of the event, and she could feel the weight of expectation pressing on her shoulders. But as she glanced through the crowd, her breath caught. At the far side of the room, speaking with a group of bankers, stood David Miller. His hair was thinner, his suit less perfectly fitted, and his once unshakable aura of confidence seemed frayed at the edges. He laughed a little too loudly, gesturing with exaggerated charm. For a moment, Emily thought she was imagining him, but when his eyes drifted across the room and locked onto hers, the years collapsed into a single, jarring instant. David excused himself from his group and began walking toward her. Emily's stomach tightened, but she straightened her posture, refusing to let old wounds dictate her presence. "Emily," he said, his voice carrying a mix of surprise and forced warmth. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," she replied evenly, though her pulse raced. He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You look successful. I've been reading about Greenpack. Quite the empire you've built." Her lips curved into a polite smile. "Yes. We've worked hard." There was a pause as David studied her, his expression unreadable. Finally, he chuckled. "Funny, isn't it? Back then, I thought you'd hold me back. And now, here you are, center stage, while I—" His voice trailed off, and for the first time she noticed the weariness in his face. Emily tilted her head slightly. "While you what?" He gave a small shrug. "Let's just say the market hasn't been kind to me. A few investments didn't pan out, but I'm still standing. That's what matters, right?" His attempt at bravado rang hollow. Emily felt no triumph, only a quiet detachment. The man who once dictated her worth now seemed strangely diminished. Before she could respond, An organizer approached her. "Ms. Carter, we're ready for you on stage." Emily nodded, then turned back to David. "Excuse me, duty calls." He stepped aside, but his voice followed her. "Maybe we can talk after. Catch up properly." She didn't answer, only walked toward the stage with her head high. As she stood before the audience, the spotlight bright and warm, she began her speech with steady confidence. "When people told me I couldn't, I chose to believe I could. When doors closed, I found windows, and when failure knocked me down, I stood back up. GreenPack Solutions was built not from wealth or privilege, but from resilience." Applause erupted, filling the ballroom. From the stage, Emily caught sight of David at the back of the room, his face unreadable as he listened. For the first time, she realized he was no longer part of her story, only a reminder of how far she had come. The night ended with handshakes, congratulations, and new opportunities flooding her inbox. But the memory of David's worn expression lingered. She knew their paths would cross again, and when they did, she would be ready. The morning after the conference, Emily sat in the hotel cafe sipping black coffee while scrolling through emails. Her keynote had drawn a flood of attention. Investors, journalists, potential partners. Each message felt like validation carved into stone. Yet her mind wasn't fully on the screen. She couldn't shake the image of David standing in the back of that ballroom, his eyes fixed on her as she spoke. She didn't have to wait long. A shadow fell across her table, and when she looked up, there he was. David carried himself with the same polished charm, but up close the crack showed. His tie was slightly loosened, his eyes tired. "Do you mind if I join you?" he asked. Emily hesitated, then gestured toward the empty chair. For a few minutes. He sat down, offering a practiced smile. "You were incredible last night. Really. The way the audience hung on your every word, it was something else." "Thank you," she replied coolly, taking another sip of coffee. David leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I'll admit, I didn't expect to see you here, not like this. You've built something remarkable. I should have seen it back then." Emily's chest tightened, but she kept her expression calm. "Back then, you weren't looking for someone to believe in. You were looking for someone to decorate your success." He flinched, the words striking harder than he expected. "That's not fair." "I was ambitious, maybe arrogant, but I cared about us." "You cared about appearances," she corrected. "When you said I was too poor, not enough. You broke more than a marriage. You tried to break me." David's gaze dropped to the table. For a moment, the mask slipped, revealing the regret etched into his features. "I was wrong," he admitted quietly. "I thought money defined worth. I see now it doesn't. You proved that." Emily studied him, searching for sincerity. She found fragments of it, though layered with self-preservation. "Do you want forgiveness, David?" she asked softly. His eyes met hers again, almost pleading. "Maybe. Or maybe I just want you to know I see who you are now, and I envy it." A silence settled between them, heavy with years of unspoken pain. Emily's heart thudded, not with longing but with clarity. She had once craved his approval, now it felt irrelevant. She placed her cup down gently. "I don't need your envy. I don't even need your apology. What I needed, I built for myself, and I will never let anyone measure me by their standards again." David exhaled, shoulders slumping. "You're stronger than I ever realized." "No," she said firmly. "I was always strong, you just couldn't see it." The words left her lips with a finality that startled even her. For the first time since their divorce, she felt no weight pressing down, no invisible chain tying her to his judgment. David gave a faint nod, as if acknowledging defeat. "I guess there's nothing more to say." "Not between us," she agreed. He stood, adjusting his jacket. For a fleeting second he looked like the man she once loved, but the illusion faded quickly. Without another word he walked away, disappearing into the bustle of the cafe. Emily sat back, the noise of clinking cups and quiet chatter filling her ears. She felt lighter, as if years of residue had finally burned away. Confronting David hadn't changed her past, but it had freed her future. and as she picked up her phone to answer the flood of opportunities waiting, she knew she no longer carried the shadow of his voice inside her. She was her own measure now. GreenPack Solutions had crossed the threshold from promising startup to established force. By its 5th year, the company boasted offices in Boston, Chicago, and Silicon Valley, each buzzing with teams who believed they were reshaping the future of packaging. Orders flowed in from national retailers, shipping companies, and e-commerce giants. What had started as a fragile idea in Emily's notebook was now a corporation valued at $500 million. Recognition followed quickly. Magazines splashed her face across glossy covers, branding her the woman who reinvented packaging. She was invited to panels at Harvard and MIT, where students leaned forward, hanging on her words. Industry leaders, once skeptical, now sought her advice. For the first time, Emily felt not just like a survivor, but like a pioneer. Still, the spotlight carried its own weight. At a gala in New York, where she was being honored as one of Forbes' top 50 self-made women, Emily stood on stage as cameras flashed. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, the air heavy with perfume and the clink of champagne glasses. "Success," she told the audience, "isn't about where you start. It's about refusing to stop. I was told I wasn't enough. Today I stand here because I chose to believe otherwise. GreenPack Solutions isn't just my company, it's proof that resilience builds empires." Thunderous applause filled the room. As Emily stepped down from the stage, she caught sight of David standing near the back, partially hidden by the crowd. His suit looked dated compared to the sharp tuxedos around him, and though he clapped along with the others, his eyes revealed something colder: envy. Later, during the reception, he approached her. "You've certainly made a name for yourself," he said, his tone carrying a faint edge. Emily smiled politely. "And you've certainly kept track of it." His jaw tightened. "It's hard to ignore when every magazine has your face on it. Do you know what it's like to watch someone you dismissed become this?" Her gaze held steady. "I imagine it feels like regret." He didn't answer, only sipped his drink, his silence louder than words. Emily left him standing there, choosing instead to mingle with CEOs and innovators who now looked at her with admiration rather than dismissal. Yet beneath the glamour, she never lost sight of her purpose. At a strategy meeting in Boston, she addressed her executive team. "We're not just here to grow profits, we're here to lead responsibly. Our packaging reduces waste, but we need to go further. Community outreach, education, partnerships with schools. We must prove that success means giving back." Sophia, now GreenPack's head of marketing, leaned forward. "You're building more than a company, Emily. You're building a legacy." Those words echoed through her, warming her more than any award. Meanwhile, articles about David began surfacing. His investment firm had collapsed under poor decisions, leaving him struggling to rebuild his reputation. Once celebrated in New York finance circles, he was now whispered about as a cautionary tale. Emily read one of those articles during a flight, the plane humming softly around her. She closed the magazine and gazed out the window, clouds drifting below. For a brief moment she felt a pang, not of longing but of pity. Her life had taken her farther than she ever imagined, and his had unraveled. Fate had not punished him through her triumph, but his downfall highlighted the hollowness of the values he once worshipped. Emily leaned back, her mind already turning toward the next challenge. Recognition was gratifying, but it was not her end goal. Power wasn't about wealth or headlines. True power was using her position to shape something greater than herself, and that was exactly what she intended to do. Winter in Boston was unforgiving. Snow blanketed the streets, muffling the noise of the city, and sharp winds rattled the windows of GreenPack's headquarters. Inside, the office glowed with warmth, holiday lights strung along the lobby, employees exchanging gifts, the energy of success buzzing in every corner. Emily stood at the top floor, staring out over the icy Charles River, her reflection in the glass looking stronger than she ever remembered. Yet her thoughts weren't on the view. They circled back to David, to the unexpected moments he had reappeared in her life. His face at the gala, his voice tinged with regret, his hollow envy. She had built an empire, but some part of her still carried the old wound he had left behind. It wasn't pain anymore, it was residue. That night, over dinner with Sophia, she finally gave voice to it. "I can't keep letting him occupy space in my head," she admitted, pushing her fork aside. "It doesn't matter how successful I am if I still measure myself against the shadow of what he did." Sophia tilted her head, studying her. "So, what are you going to do? You can't change the past." "I don't want to change it," Emily replied softly. "I want to let it go." Not for him, for me. A week later, she agreed to meet David one final time. They sat in a quiet cafe in Midtown Manhattan, snowflakes swirling outside. He looked older, wearier, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee he barely touched. "I don't know why you agreed to see me," he said, breaking the silence. "I've made enough mistakes to last a lifetime." Emily leaned forward, her voice calm but resolute. "I came because I needed to tell you this to your face. I forgive you." His eyes widened, confusion flickering across his features. "Forgive me? After everything I said to you, everything I did?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let resentment define me. You tried to make me believe I was worthless, but I know my worth now, and holding on to anger only chains me to you. I won't carry it anymore." For once, David had no retort. His lips parted as if to argue, but the words never came. Instead, he looked down at the table, his shoulders slumping. "You've become everything I wasn't strong enough to be." Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. When she stood to leave, she offered him a small nod, not of reconciliation but of release. She stepped out into the snowy street, the cold air sharp against her skin, and felt lighter than she had in years. Forgiveness had freed her, not him. Back in Boston, she turned her focus toward something greater. At a company-wide meeting, she announced a new initiative, a foundation dedicated to supporting women entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. "We've built something extraordinary here," she told her employees, her voice ringing with conviction. "But success means nothing if we don't lift others with us. This foundation will provide mentorship, resources and funding for women who have been told they're not enough, just like I once was." The room erupted in applause, her team energized by her vision. Sophia beamed at her from the front row, pride glowing in her eyes. In that moment, Emily understood that forgiveness wasn't the end of her journey. It was the clearing of the path ahead. She had shed the last remnants of her past, leaving space to build a future not just for herself, but for countless others. And as snow fell quietly outside the office windows, Emily felt certain. Her story was no longer about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving what was possible. The sun set over Boston Harbor, painting the sky in streaks of gold and crimson. From the top floor of Greenpack's headquarters, Emily watched the light shimmer across the water. The city hummed below, alive with the rhythm of progress, and she felt its pulse mirror her own. This was the city where she had arrived with nothing but a suitcase, a broken heart, and a fragile spark of determination. Now it was the place where her empire stood tall. Her office walls were lined with awards, photographs of milestones and letters from young entrepreneurs who had been inspired by her story. The Greenpack Foundation had already funded dozens of women-led startups, and Emily made time to meet many of them personally. Each encounter reminded her why she had chosen this path, not to prove David wrong, but to prove what resilience could build. One afternoon, she walked through the office, greeting employees by name. The energy was infectious, teams brainstorming new designs, engineers testing prototypes, marketers planning campaigns. They weren't just working jobs, they were part of a mission. Emily's leadership had created more than a company, it had created a culture. At a board meeting later that week, an investor congratulated her. "Greenpack is valued at over $500 million now. You've done what most people only dream of." Emily smiled, but her answer was measured. "We're not done. True success isn't in the number on a valuation sheet. It's in the lives we impact and the changes we set in motion." Her words weren't rehearsed, they came from the core of who she had become. In quiet moments, Emily sometimes reflected on the road that had brought her here. The nights in her cramped apartment, the sting of rejection, the humiliation of being told she wasn't enough. She no longer replayed those memories with bitterness. They were scars, yes, but scars that marked survival. Without them, she might never have found the fire to rise. One evening, as she walked home through the snowy streets, Sophia teased her gently. "Do you ever stop to realize you're living the kind of story people write movies about?" Emily laughed, the sound warm in the cold night air. "If you had told me years ago that this is where I'd end up, I would have thought you were crazy." Sophia bumped her shoulder playfully. "Crazy, maybe. But you were always destined for this. You just had to believe it." Emily smiled, her breath visible in the frosty air. "Maybe destiny isn't something we wait for. Maybe it's something we build, one choice at a time." The words lingered between them, carrying the weight of truth. Far away in New York, David read yet another article about Emily. Her photograph filled the page, her story framed as one of perseverance and triumph. He closed the magazine slowly, a bitter taste in his mouth. She had become everything he once believed impossible, and he had become little more than a footnote in her journey. For him, the chapter was closed. For her, it had only ever been a prologue. Back in Boston, Emily returned to her office window overlooking the harbor. She thought of the young woman who had walked away from a Manhattan apartment with nothing but resolve. That woman still lived within her, whispering reminders of strength. Turning to the future, Emily spoke softly to herself. It was never about proving him wrong. It was about proving me right. And with that she smiled, ready for whatever came next. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories like this. Stories of resilience, redemption, and triumph. And don't stop here. Click the video on your screen now to continue this journey with us.